Hello Chrysophulture, welcome back to the channel, Old Boy here, and today we're going to be looking at the language which was spoken by the Gallaecians in the Iberian Peninsula prior to the Roman invasion. Please remember that this video is part of a series, so while you can watch this video as a standalone episode, I do recommend that you go back to the beginning as this will give you some more context. So with that being said, let's get into the video. So what is the Gallaecian language? Well, Gallaecian, sometimes also known as Northwestern Hispano-Celtic, is a now extinct language that was spoken by the Gallaeci in the northwestern Iberian Peninsula between the beginning of the first millennium until the Roman period. The area inhabited by the Gallaecians included modern-day Galicia, western Asturias, western Leon, and the northern regions of Portugal. And this region was annexed by Rome during the Cantabrian Wars, becoming the Roman province of Gallaecia. The Gallaecians were assimilated into Roman culture, and unfortunately, as they didn't adopt writing until the Roman period, no direct extant records of the original language spoken by the people of Gallaecia remains. However, linguistic information recovered through the analysis of personal names, place names, names of deities and ethnonyms that occur in Latin inscriptions and in classical Greek and Latin sources have shown the presence of a Celtic language being spoken in the area. Here is what Carlos Jordan Colera from the University of Zaragoza, Spain has to say. Quote, "We prefer to use the term Hispano-Celtic as a hyponym to include all linguistic varieties of Celtic spoken in the Iberian Peninsula before the arrival of the Romans. In the northwest of the Iberian Peninsula, and more specifically between the west and North Atlantic coasts, in an imaginary line running north-south linking Oviedo and Merida, there is a corpus of Latin inscriptions with particular characteristics of its own. This corpus contains some linguistic features that are clearly Celtic, and others that, in our opinion, are not Celtic. The former we shall group for the moment under the label Northwestern Hispano-Celtic." End quote. Blanca Maria Prosper of the University of Salamanca has also written that she believes that the political borders of the time can be matched to the dialectical borders, with Gallaecia Lucensis in the northwestern region of the Roman province of Gallaecia being one of the regions which appears to be mostly Celtic-speaking. Quote, "I am increasingly inclined to believe some natural or political borders can be matched with dialectical borders. The Gallaecian Lucensis, northern Asturia, and the area of the Cantabria, besides the southwestern Baeturia Celtica, appear to be mostly Celtic-speaking." End quote. Under the P or Q Celtic hypothesis, Gallaecian appears to fall under the Q Celtic umbrella alongside Goidelic or Gaelic. And Gallaecian is thought to be related to the northeastern Hispano-Celtic language, which was a branch of Celtic spoken by the Celtiberians. The hypothesis distinguishes between P and Q Celtic based on whether the language has stopped utilising the Proto-Celtic letter Q in favour of the letter P. In the case of Gallaecian, we can see it has avoided this shift, as is evidenced by words such as the ethnonym equisi, which is a derivation of the Indo-European word for horse, equos. As you will notice, the word utilises the letter Q, equisi, in the word, similar to how Latin, for example, uses the letter Q in their word for horse, which is equus. This contrasts with ancient Greek, which instead utilises a P sound in their word for horse, which is hippos. Another example is the ethnonym querquerni, which appears in Gallaecian, which is from the Proto-Indo-European word berku, which means oak. Here is what J.R. Mallory has to say on the matter in his book In Search of the Indo-Europeans, Language, Archaeology and Myth. Quote, "There is some linguistic support for this hypothesis, since the Celtic language spoken in Spain appears to have avoided the famous shift from Proto-Celtic Q to P that occurs in all of the other continental Celtic languages." End quote. Western Hispano-Celtic is a term used to describe a proposed language group situated on the western side of the Iberian Peninsula, which includes Gallaecian. According to John T. Cook, in Celtic from the West, Alternative Perspectives from Archaeology, Genetics, Language and Literature, the Western Celtic varieties of the Iberian Peninsula share a sufficient core of distinctive features with Celtiberian to justify Hispano-Celtic as a term for a linguistic subfamily, as opposed to a purely geographical classification. With that being said, let us now take a look at some Celtiberian. In Celtic culture, John T. Cook describes Celtiberia as, quote, the region in east-central Spain during the Roman period and immediately preceding it, end quote, and that the term was used to refer to the regions of the upper Ebro Valley as well as eastern Meseta, which roughly includes the modern provinces of Soria, Zaragoza, Guadalajara and Cuenca. Classical authors such as Diodorus Siculus claimed the Celtiberians were a mix of Celtic immigrants and native Iberians, and this notion that the Celtiberians hold a syncretic origin from both Celtic tribes and non-Indo-European speaking Iberians is a hypothesis which is generally accepted by modern scholars. Quote, in ancient times, the two peoples, namely the Iberians and the Celts, kept warring amongst themselves over the land. But when later they arranged their differences and settled upon the land together, and when they went further and agreed to intermarriage with each other, because of such intermixture, the two peoples received the appellation given above. And since it was two powerful nations that united, and the land of theirs were fertile, it came to pass that the Celtiberians advanced far in fame, and were subdued by the Romans with difficulty, and only after they had faced them in battle over a long period. And this people, it would appear, provide for warfare not only excellent cavalry, but also foot soldiers who excel in prowess and endurance. They wear rough black cloaks, the wool of which resembles the hair of goats. As for their arms, certain of the Celtiberians carry light shields like those of the Gauls, and certain carry circular wicker shields as large as an aspis, and about their shins and calves they wear greaves made of hair, and on their heads they wear bronze helmets adorned with purple crests. The swords they wear are two-edged and wrought of excellent iron, and they also have dirks, a span in length, which they use in fight at close quarters, and a peculiar practice is followed by them in the fashioning of their defensive weapons, for they bury plates of iron in the ground and leave them there until in the course of time the rust has eaten out what is weak in the iron, and what is left is only the most unyielding, and of this they fashion excellent swords and such other objects as pertain to war. The weapon which has been fashioned in the manner described cuts through anything which gets in its way, for no shield or helmet or bone can withstand a blow for it, because of the exceptional quality of the iron." End quote. The Celtiberian language is described by John T. Cook as, quote, the continental dialect for which there is written evidence from eastern central Spain, which is attested in a few major inscriptions and in numerous legends on coinage." End quote. These inscriptions utilise the Iberian semi-syllabary script and later the Latin alphabet. In terms of its case forms, which is how a word is inflected in order to show its grammatical relation to the rest of the sentence, Celtiberian preserve forms which are not found in Gaulish or Insular Celtic, and where understood, the vocabulary of Celtiberian is somewhat different from the other Celtic languages, and according to John T. Cook, shows more similarities with other, older Indo-European languages such as Sanskrit and Hittite. According to Karl Horst Schmidt, a doctor of philology and the editor of the Celtic Philology Review, Celtiberian can be classified as a language which follows a SOV or subject, object, verb pattern. Quote, the archaic character of the marginal languages Celtiberian and Goidelic is confirmed by a number of syntactic and morphological features. Celtiberian syntax is characterised by the basic word order SOV. End quote. This means that in the construction of a sentence, the words should be placed in the order of subject, object, verb. And as an example, if we took the English sentence John ate bread, which as it happens is in the order of subject, verb, object, and were to transform it into SOV like Celtiberian, our sentence would become John bread ate. In this respect, Celtiberian utilises the same pattern of word order as Basque, Gothic, Hittite, Latin, Persian and Sanskrit, and is distinct from languages such as modern English, which follows an SVO pattern, as well as languages such as Biblical Hebrew, which is commonly thought to follow a VSO pattern. According to John T. Cook, this SOV pattern, along with the rest of the information presented on the topic, shows that the Celtiberian syntax contains the most archaic features attested within the Celtic languages. The Celtiberian script is described as a Paleo-Hispanic script, which is the term used to describe the writing systems of the Iberian Peninsula, which are in use prior to the adoption of the Latin alphabet. In the instance of Celtiberian, it is specifically an adaptation of what is described as the northeastern Iberian script. All of the Paleo-Hispanic scripts, with the exception of Greco-Iberian, share a common distinctive characteristic in that they utilise some symbols to represent syllabic values for the stop consonants, while the rest of the consonants and vowels are each represented by a single symbol. Because of this, they are described as neither an alphabet nor syllabaries, and are instead called semi-syllabaries. In the instance of Western Celtiberian, we find the following symbols represent stop consonants, followed by a vowel which give it its syllabic value. For example, these symbols represent the following: ga, ge, gi, go, gu, ka, ke, ki, ko, ku, da, de, di, do, du, ta, te, ti, to, tu, ba, be, bi, bo, bu, and these latter symbols can also be pa, pe, pi, po, pu. The 5 vowels each have their own symbols, as do the remaining consonants. There is currently no agreement within academia as to how these scripts evolved, with some scholars concluding that they were derived solely from the Phoenician alphabet, while others conclude that the Greek alphabet was also involved. The Phoenician influence can certainly be found on the Iberian Peninsula, especially along the east and southern coasts, as we've discussed in previous episodes, and this presence is often thought to be the means of how the Phoenician letters were brought to the region. However, it's important to note that Diodorus Siculus tells us that the letters were called Phoenician only because the Phoenicians were the ones who spread the letters, and that the first people to have used them were in fact the Pelasgians, and the letters were first called Pelasgic. Quote, "Among the Greeks, Linus was the first to discover the different rhythms and song, and when Cadmus brought from Phoenicia the letters as they are called, Linus was again the first to transfer them into the Greek language, to give a name to each character and to fix its shape. Now the letters as a group are called Phoenician because they were brought to the Greeks from the Phoenicians, but as single letters the Pelasgians were the first to make use of the transferred characters, and so they were called Pelasgic." End quote. This is further evidenced by the editors of the Loeb Classical Library, who comment on the letters which were discovered in the Palace of Cadmus, Thebes, as discussed by Professor Rhys Carpenter in the American Journal of Philology in 1935, by noting that the letters found there were not Semitic in origin. Quote, "The question now is how early did the Phoenician letters appear on the Greek mainland? The Palace of Cadmus, if Cadmus is a historical figure, has been discovered in Thebes, and may be roughly dated to around 1400 to 1200 BC, and letters were found in it, but they were not of Semitic origin." End quote. So that's going to conclude our episode looking at the Celtic languages of the Iberian Peninsula. Please do let me know your thoughts in the comments. I just want to say thank you to everyone who watches and supports my work in this channel. It is very much appreciated. Thanks again for the continued support. I hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you on the next one. Old boy out.